Got myself, I'm Chuck Mullins. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur, for lack of a better term. Been in the internet business since 1996 when I graduated high school. Haven't had a real job since college when I was, waiting tables. We've got Jason Yelowitz. He's a senior broker at Quiet Light Brokerage. He's a former super affiliate and author of The Bathrobe Millionaire, sorry. David Gass, online entrepreneur since 1999. And he has had real jobs. And he continues to have real jobs, helping other people. He built a business ranked 3 years in a row on the Inc. 500 fastest growing websites. He is a full-time buying and selling websites since 2008. He has a internet investment conference on buying and selling websites, which is really good for networking and learning all kinds of great stuff. So we're going to start off with Jason here, and he's going to talk about positioning for an exit and selling your business.
Great. Okay, thanks, Chuck. We had a really good strategic reason for starting with how to sell your site, which is that my PowerPoint was queued up first. So, all right. So, as Chuck mentioned, my name is Jason Yelowitz. My company is Quiet Light Brokerage, and we sell websites. And it's pretty funny. I was in the hall about 30 minutes ago. I was talking to a guy, and he said, "Hey, have you ever heard of such and such site?" I'm like, "Yeah, I sold that site 2 years ago." So that was kind of cool. So the title, Preparing Your Website for Sale, even if you don't plan to sell. You may say, well, what's the point? I love my websites. I'm making money. The point is, you don't know what's coming. A divorce, a change of interest, a new opportunity, a real estate deal, an unsolicited bid. There's a lot of reasons that you may suddenly change your mind and decide, hey, it's time to sell my website. So for that reason, it makes sense to plan ahead and be prepared. So first of all, who's buying websites? We got guys at the table here who are professionals at it, and then there's a lot of sort of average, ordinary people. There are some small private equity firms. We get lots of calls from them looking to buy sites. They don't often come to fruition. We do have, number 3 on the list, individuals. Most of the people that are buying sites that are in the kind of $200,000 to $1 million range are just ordinary people. Might be a laid-off corporate executive who's got some cash looking for income. And there's a benefit that you have that they don't have. Most of you in this room know how to build a site. You know how to get traffic. You know how to monetize. There's people out there that look at it from a completely different perspective. They want the return on investment. So they'll say, well, your site is making $100,000 a year. I'll give you, $250,000 for it. And from their perspective, they're thinking, that's a good rate of return. I'll make 40% cash on cash. From your perspective, you're thinking, wow, I built this thing in a year and a half. I'll take the money and build something bigger. So it really can be a win-win. And if that sounds appealing to you, there's certain things you can do to really get your site ready to go. So from the perspective of buyers, at least what we see, well, that didn't load. Oh, there it goes. Okay. There's 3 pillars of value. The first thing they're looking for is ongoing stability. Do they think that whatever you've built is actually going to be around not just for another 6 months, but for another 3 or 4 years? The next is growth prospects. Now, the funny irony is every buyer says that they're looking for growth. When I follow up after the sale, the vast majority of them never do anything to try to grow the site after they buy it, but to actually make a sale, they want to believe that there are avenues they can pursue for growth. So it's important to have ideas for how to grow your site, even if you haven't tapped them. And then the final thing, and this is probably most important, is provability. So I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen a site where I believe the owner. He'll tell me he makes $1 million a year doing this, that, or the other. I'll say, that sounds great. He said, can you sell it for me? I said, can you? And I'll say, can you prove it? He's like, well, not really. The money goes through my sister-in-law's account, and I'm spending on my personal credit card, blah, 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 blah. It's really hard to sell a website if you cannot prove the financials, the traffic, and the key metrics, at least if you want to get any real money for it. So the basic formula for value for buyers is they're going to look at your bottom line profit, and there's different ways of calculating this, and then they're going to apply a multiple to that, and that's how they arrive at the value. And everyone's wondering, what's the multiple? It's not going to knock your socks off. Usually they'll pay between about 2 times whatever you earned in the last 12 months up to about 3, maybe 3.5 times that amount. That's where the market is today. It used to be higher, and probably 5 years ago it was quite a bit higher. And since then, Google started doing all sorts of algorithm changes, and people realized that you can't necessarily count on yesterday's profits to continue till tomorrow. Okay, so as far as those 3 pillars, as far as stability goes, kind of the biggest thing that I think people are looking for are single points of failure. If your website is completely dependent on SEO, you might be the greatest SEO in the world, but you don't control Google. You don't know what's going to happen. If your site is completely dependent on one key vendor relationship, like if you have an e-commerce site, hey, what happens if that vendor goes belly up? So if you're thinking about selling your site at any point, you want to analyze it from a buyer's point of view and say, what are the potential weaknesses that I'm not seeing because I'm so happy rolling in the money that I'm making, but if I were a buyer and I was a very skeptical person, what would I see as potential points of weakness? Okay, along with ongoing stability, what I was just touching on, there really is a different mindset between buyers and sellers. Sellers tend to be entrepreneurs. We tend to be an optimistic bunch that sees the bright side of everything and always sees opportunity. Buyers, like I said, a lot of times it's people from the corporate world. It's people that might be risking their life savings. For good reason, they're going to be a lot more skeptical than you are. If you do want to sell, the time to sell is when things are going well. I can't tell you the number of calls that we get of people saying, can you sell my site? And it's always the month after some big Google algorithm update or some other meteorite that just hit the internet world. Unfortunately, buyers are going to sniff right through that. So if you're selling right after things took a tumble, you should expect that to reflect in the price that someone will pay. So if your goal is to exit, don't wait till something bad happens, because I can't tell you the number of times I've seen sites that look sustainable and then 6 months later something happened. And probably the worst example, I remember in January 2011, a guy called me, asked me for a valuation. I said, your site is worth about $1 million. He called me back in March and said, can I get a new valuation? I said, maybe I could get you 50 grand. In between, there was a Google update. It just devastated his site. Now, one of the points is, the reason he didn't sell with me for $1 million, he wanted more. He wanted $1.5 million. And the thing is, you never realize you're being greedy at the time, but in hindsight, it's always one of these, I wish I would have sold while I had the chance kind of deals. All right, so another thing buyers really look at is growth prospects. The easiest way to demonstrate that is with the history of growth. If you've got a couple years in a row where things have been going in the right direction, that's great. Even if a site has been flatlining, there's plenty of buyers for that. If a site is going down, we can sell it if the rate of decline isn't too bad. But if it's really dropping off a cliff, often you'll do better just to wring out whatever you can get from it rather than selling, because buyers are not stupid. They're going to see the trend, and they're going to insist on seeing your Google Analytics and whatever other stats you have. All right, so how do you create a growth site? We like to say plan for the uncontrollable. Try and figure out where are there natural areas of growth. So an example might be, if you're selling stuff on Amazon, expand to eBay. That's a natural area of growth. If you're successfully advertising on Google AdWords, expand to Bing. There's sort of natural low-hanging fruit, and the more you do it, the more diversified you are, the more likely a buyer is going to see your site as being stable. We suggest being methodical when you're pursuing new growth areas. So one of the common things I'll see is someone will want to list a site with us, or they'll actually list, and then they'll try and do 10 things at once. Well, I've got all these growth ideas. I'm doing this, that, and that. Generally, you don't want to rock the boat too much if you're planning for a sale. You want to do things incrementally, keep things pretty smooth. If something doesn't work, you want to be able to identify it and shut it off. But it's not one of those roll the dice and go for the gold, to mix metaphors, because it's just too much chaos in a situation where you want to be showing stability. Okay, provability is probably the most important thing. So a site that's doing good, decent, or slightly bad can usually be sold if you've got good records. So one of the big important things to understand if you're selling a site is you might live in Virginia. The buyer might live in California or in Israel or Jordan or far away geographically. You don't get the benefit of a handshake and an eye-to-eye when you're doing the initial negotiations. So building credibility is extremely important. The way to build credibility is, for one, keep clean records. That means financial records. That means cough it up and pay for a bookkeeper. They're only like $40 an hour, and a couple hours a month will usually keep your books nice and clean. Keep third-party verification like Google Analytics, or you can pay for quantified Alexa analytics or Quantcast, something like that. Keep your customer data, keep it clean, keep it neat, keep it separate from your personal stuff. When you get to the due diligence stage of a deal and a buyer wants to see your credit card receipts, you want it to show, Google AdWords, Bing, some SEO firm. You don't want your personal massage, your trip to 7-Eleven or any of that stuff showing up on there, or else it makes buyers nervous and they start thinking that you're not a clean and organized person. And because a lot of these deals are built on trust, you lose trust if you don't keep good, clean, non-intermingled kind of records. So this is just another beat you over the head about keep your books in order. One of the biggest things we see, we'll see sites that make $1 million a year, and we'll ask the owner, can you give us a profit and loss statement? Now, you don't have to be an accountant to know what a profit and loss statement is. It's really simple. It's the money you make, the expenses that you pay, A minus B equals C, the profit. A lot of people don't even have something like that. They've got their own informal spreadsheet, or they kind of keep it in their head, or they just look at their bank balance. If you're actually trying to sell a site, it's important to if you don't have your books in order, get them in order prior to selling the site. And if you don't know how to do it, you may want to contact a business broker, because often they'll have templates that you can use and they'll be able to give you a hand. But ultimately, it's going to be up to you to find all the records to put into there. So finally, beyond the financial stuff, buyers like to see as many stats as you have. The more you know your business, the easier it's going to be to sell. If you know your conversion rate for different types of traffic, what kind of orders you get and returns, how many customers are repeat. Now, you don't need to know all this stuff, but the more you know it, the more credible you'll be, the more trust there will be with the buyer, the more likely a deal will actually get done. So that's kind of the long and short. Just to give an overview of how to sell your site if that's something you want to do. There are sell-it-yourself marketplaces. Flippa comes to mind as the predominant one. Usually that's for smaller sites that are valued in the, sort of 0 to maybe 50 or 60,000 range. There's brokerages like us. Usually we'll specialize in sites that are worth maybe between about 100 grand and up to about 5 million. And if your site is worth more than that, there's other types of brokerages that are more specialty. But for the vast majority of people, you fall in that range. So just something to think about from day one. Even if you're not planning to sell the site, it's good to get in the habit of doing things that will allow you to, if ever you should need to. Thanks.
I just got shocked. Again, my name's Chuck. Like I said, I started in '96, so I've been doing this for a long time. I think all these guys have kind of been in it for a long time. It's a great place to be. So, if you're thinking about buying and selling websites, here's a couple questions you really should ask yourself just at the get-go, right? Why am I buying and selling websites? How much is my time worth? That's huge. You need to know what your time is worth. Do I want a job or an investment? What kind of return on my capital investment do I need? What size deal makes sense? What kind of risk does the site have? And what are my plans for the site? So, know your reasons for buying, okay? So is it for cash flow, right? Do you have a bunch of money that you want to put into something and develop some sort of a cash flow to maybe diversify your income? Do you want to do asset appreciation? Do you want to buy something with the hopes that I bought it at $1 million, I'm going to bring it up to $2 million regardless of how much money is throwing off, and then do an exit and get a big windfall? Right? Is it for synergies? Do you have a site and maybe you see something that's for sale that you can bolt onto yours that increases the value of both combined? Is it for untapped potential? I had a friend who was selling real estate leads, and he switched offers and got like 10 times as much money for the new offer. So I said to him, well, why don't you go and look for people who are still promoting that old offer and try to buy those sites, even if you pay a premium, and then switch it over to this new offer. All of a sudden, you're getting 10 times what the old site owner was getting, right? So that's untapped potential. Maybe you're building an in-house link network. So we all know that if you want to get ranked on Google, you have to have links pointing to you. So maybe you have your one money site, and you buy smaller sites that all kind of point to your money site and help, increase the results on that one. Know your reasons for selling, right? Are you just wanting to cash out? Maybe you want to buy a boat or house or something like that. Maybe you're looking to redeploy the capital. So maybe you've taken a business as far as you think you can take it, and now you want to cash out and buy a new business that still has some opportunity that you think you can exploit. Maybe it's a declining market. Maybe I saw a site for sale right around the Mayan calendar thing, and it was like a survivalist website. And it was on Flippa, and the guy was selling, it was either right before or right after the Mayan calendar. And it was clear that he probably anticipated that the market was going to drop because we already went through the millennium and all this other stuff. So he was getting out before that market started dropping. And maybe if you're like me, you've bought way too many websites and you need to sell a few just to kind of focus on your core business and just get rid of some of the noise and kind of bring back in. It can also be just that you're bored. Most of the sites I've bought from people are like owners that are they've been doing it forever and they're bored with it and they want to do something new. So they just want to cash out and try something new. So an important thing, how much is your time worth? So let's say you said, okay, I'm worth $100,000 a year. That equates to about $50 an hour. So don't work for less than $50 an hour. Like, it seems pretty obvious, but I think a lot of people don't think about it. So if somebody said, oh, I'll sell you a site that's $1,000 a month it's making net, but it requires 10 hours of work per week. If you calculate that out, that means you're working for $25 an hour. And that's not taking into account the cost of your capital. So same thing, $10,000 site, 10 hours a week. Now you're making $250 an hour. That makes more sense. So really just figure out how much your time is worth and get an understanding for the time requirements of purchasing a company. So do you want a job or an investment? Same thing. Sites saying I'm making $3,000 a month, pure profit. Would you pay 6 months multiple on that, right? 18 grand. It sounds like an amazing deal, right? I can 18 grand to make 3 grand a month. That's beautiful. But then you find out, what are the real costs in terms of time? And they say, oh, well, you got to put in like 40 hours a week. You just buy yourself a job, and that job is paying you $18.75 an hour. That's stupid, right? You don't want to do that. It's not an investment. That's a job, and it's not a very well-paying job. So what kind of ROI do you want on your capital, right? So there's an amount of how much my time is worth, but then there's also how much is my capital worth. So you've got things like you can invest in, right? CDs, bonds, stocks. They all pay out different percentages, and those percentages are typically based on risk. So you got to think about what is a good return for the risk that I'm going to take by purchasing this site. Okay? I would say, let's just say maybe you want to get 25% return. So what size deal makes sense for you if you want to get a 25% return? Okay? If you do a $100,000 deal, 25% return gives you 25 grand a year. $500K deal, it's $125 per year is your return on your capital. Then you got to account for how much time you have to put into the deal. So if I got to put in 40 hours a month, not a week, a month, at $50 an hour, that's $24K per year of my time, right? Now, when you think about it, okay, the first one, on that 100K investment, what I really need to look for is not something that's doing a 25% return. I need to look for something that's doing a 49% return when I'm accounting for the percentage I want to make on my capital plus my time requirements. When you have a bigger deal, obviously your time requirements don't affect the bottom line as much. So in this example, with a $500,000 deal, you only really need a 29.8% return to account for your time and your capital at a 25% return. So, something you need to look at, and do we guys want more slides or do you want like more chance to ask questions? Anybody? Questions? All right, I'll skip these things. You don't really need these. This is an important one. So, is the investment worth the risk? What is the traffic mix? And Jason kind of touched on this a little bit, but we were looking at buying a site, and it was actually through Jason recently, and the company had about a third of their income coming from Amazon. Well, we got an email that said Amazon is changing some terms, and it was for a different business we had, but those same terms were going to affect this deal, and it meant that they were going to lose 100% of that Amazon income. Well, what if we had already gone through and purchased the deal and this was 100% of the revenue? That money would have dried up overnight, and then you would be screwed. Now, it hurts to lose a third of the income, but not anywhere near as losing 100% of the income. So you got to think about, what is the traffic mix? Where are they getting their revenue sources? Is it 100% from one thing? It's probably better to have it coming from multiple sources, kind of like Jason talked. But there's also opportunity if it's only coming from less and you know you can expand, but you have to know that you will be able to expand into those other verticals in order to make it work. So an important thing is when you're going to purchase a site, you come up with some detailed plans for what you're going to do. I've purchased sites where like 6 months have gone by and I didn't switch over like some of the income streams and stuff because it was such a small deal that it was just like had too many other things to do and it was just not worth my time I don't even know why I bought it because it wasn't worth my time to switch it over. So you want to think about these things ahead of time, right? And figure out, okay, as far as migration, the first thing you want to do is back up all the data, right? Because that's what you're buying is the data. Second, you want to transfer the domain name. Once you've done that, you want to update all the income streams and make sure that they're coming to you. Okay. Then you want to take over the accounts, so like the Aweber accounts, things like that, and followed by, if you're switching web hosts, then you transfer this stuff over. You also want to think about ahead of time operations. Who's going to do it? What are they going to do? When are they going to do it? Have the people lined up for the things that you're going to want them to do. Don't acquire the site and then go and look for people to do these things. Right? Have it set up in advance. Also, you're going to expand. You're going to do conversion rate optimization. Figure out all these things ahead of time. Who's going to do it? What are they going to do it? When are they going to do it? Right? Know these things ahead of time. So how to transfer the site. The key to everything is communication, right? You want to communicate with the seller and understand and know what each other are thinking. It's going to really help, right? You want to agree on specific terms for the transition. You want to think about what your high and your low pain points are as far as dollar value. If I have a $1,000 deal I'm trying to do, I'm not going to write a 30-page contract to make the guy to do it, to sign it, right? It's just not worth it. But if I'm doing like $1 million deal, then obviously we're going to have all kinds of lawyers involved and checking their tax returns and their bank statements and all that stuff. So you need to figure out like where your pain threshold is that you could suffer somebody scamming you and the cost involved with doing your due diligence and things like that. On your contracts, you want to make sure that you have time frames and consequences for the transfer. So, okay, we need to have this done by this date or this happens. You don't want to have somebody end up dragging their feet out forever and the deal ended up going sideways. You want to figure out what the payment terms are. You need to ask the seller to support you. Okay, I want you to be around from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the next 6 months, available to take a call from me, right? It's not to say, and you want to set, okay, but at a maximum of 20 hours total or I'll pay you something. But you want to make sure that seller's going to be there to answer questions. I had a friend who sold her site, and she said to, the guy called her up and said, hey, can you tell me, what were you thinking about doing with this, and that? And she's like, I already sold you the site. I'm not answering that. It's like, really? Like, you won't just give him the information? No. Why should I tell him that? So like there are people that will be like that. So you want to make sure that you have that negotiated up front, because not everybody's willing to give you their time. You want to make sure they sign non-competes, non-disclosures, perhaps if you can, a non-performance agreement, meaning if the site doesn't perform, you get something back. How to pay for the site, escrow, PayPal, those are the best ways, I would say. If you want to try not to give somebody cash, check, wire transfer, Western Union, unless you actually have everything you need up front, because those are no recourse. You write somebody a check, you give somebody cash, how do you get it back if they don't do what they said they're going to do? Here's a couple places you can buy it. Flippa is great for, like he said, buying smaller sites. You want to go with the brokers if you're selling or buying a bigger site. Marketplaces, miscellaneous stuff, right? Craigslist, forums, contacting site owners. So if there's something, if you're in a vertical or a niche, maybe you want to reach out to other people that are in the same thing. If you see some kind of potential for that site, you contact them. Hey, have you ever thought about selling? Maybe just networking, right? We're all in here. Maybe one of you guys got a site you want to sell me. I've definitely gone and purchased sites from people that I've met in person. Due diligence tools, right? Here's just a ton of different tools that you can use for doing due diligence. I recommend just downloading the slides, so that way we can get through it. Here's some more. There's a lot of great stuff. Some additional due diligence. So read comments. So like if somebody's selling something on Flippa, people will comment, they'll out each other. So read the comments, see what other people are saying about stuff. I've seen deals where I thought it was great, and then I read somebody's comment, and I was like, wow, I never even thought about that. Like, I'm glad this person said something. Research the seller, not just the company. You don't want to work with scummy people. Like, you need to figure out if this is a legitimate person and they're, you know, an all-around good person, because people will try to screw you. Ask questions you already know the answers to, right? Try to set them up to lie to you. If they lie to you, run. Like, don't make excuses for why they lied to you. Just get out of it. Ask them to add you to their Google Analytics account. Ask about potential revenue streams. Maybe you got some ideas of things you want to do, but you have to be careful because you don't want to tell them everything you want to do because you don't want them doing it. But at the same time, you want to make sure that it's not something they've already tried and been unsuccessful with. Because you may think, oh, I'm going to do these 3 things and it's going to make all this money. Come to find out they already tried it and it didn't work. You want to ask the seller what kind of plans he had for going forward, right? So what was he thinking about doing? Obviously, you want to ask why he was selling in the first place. Ask him to verify all claims with documentation. Again, bank accounts, tax returns, things like that. Ask about anomalies, right? You see some weird little things. Ask what that's about. I would just ask anything and everything you can think about. Thank you. So the next person is going to be Dave.
So I've got a question for you all. The question is, as I bring up my slides, are you ready for the question? The question is, how many of you are interested in potentially selling your website? You scoped them all out? You know who they are? Okay, good. All right, and how many of you are interested in possibly buying sites? All right. How many of you are just in the wrong room? You're too polite to leave? You just didn't? Okay, all right. So, how many of you are looking at it more from an investor perspective? You're really interested as an investor. I've got some money and okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some deals that we did, and then we'll take questions. Is that fair? Would it be worth your time to see deals? Okay, good. So first off, this is my easy description of people that go out and buy and sell websites. And the ant is the builder, the one that loves to go out and build websites, and then they take it and then they go sell it. The dolphin is the one that likes to buy sites and then turn around and sell them quickly, or buy them, hold them for a little bit of time, and then sell them. And then there's whales. So we're in Vegas, right? Everybody knows what a whale is? Everybody not know what a whale is in Vegas? Big pockets. They got lots of money, right? So they're typically the investor that comes in and says, here, I want to work with you. And we have investors that we do that with, where we put together funds and go out and buy sites with their money and our money, and then we manage the site for them. And then there's the dragon, which is more in my style, where we actually go out and buy sites, and the whole reason for buying them is to hold on to them for the cash flow, right? So we want that cash flow coming in. So as you start looking at the sites that we do, understand that for the most part, these are sites that we did from a cash flow perspective. We're looking to hold on to them for a while. Many of the sites I'm going to show you are ones we've sold. And the reason why we sold them was because we recently, over the last year, basically dumped 90% of our portfolio and focused in on very specific niches and only are buying in those niches from now. Our lesson learned was that when we first started out, anything that looked good, we bought it, all right? And so we ended up with this huge portfolio of all of this stuff. And to Chuck's point, one of the most valuable pieces that you can get, for those of you in the room, you have a huge, huge advantage over most people, and that is that they don't understand affiliate offers. And the fact that you understand that piece alone makes you above skill level above most people in this industry, because you can do what Chuck said, which is find somebody who's running an offer on one network when you know you could run it on another network for more money and go buy that website, right? So anyway, we dumped a bunch of these, and that's why. So here's one example. This was an ebook website. It was $6,300 was our investment. We bought it for, and you're going to see that the ranges of dollar amounts, for the sites that we've bought have ranged from mid six figures down to $500. So it's all over the board. We're not into the $1 million plus sites. That's not where we play. But this one we bought for $6,300. While we held the website, we made $4,113 on it. And to Chuck's point again, in terms of the amount of time we put into it, we have a team of people that are there anyway. So they're already doing the work. So when we bring on a new site, it's not like there's extra cost attached to it. So that's the true thing. We sold it for $7,500. So the actual profit on it was $5,313, or an 84.3% return on our money. Okay? Annualized, it was 112% when you consider the amount of time we actually held that one particular website. So it gives you an idea of, all of a sudden, when I start seeing that I can make 112% annualized return on my money, what I'm looking to get as a buyer. So for those of you that are looking to buy, those are some kinds of returns that we've gotten. I can't say what you will get. Here's one for $10,000. This was a hypnosis website. This was strictly an affiliate website. That's how it made its money, affiliate offers. We bought it for $10,000. While we held it, we made almost $25,000 in revenue off of the site. We sold it for $12,000. So our profit was $26,759 for a 267% return on our initial investment, which actually we held it for longer than a year. So we made 178% return on our money on that one site. Not bad, right? No, you guys are getting better deals than that? Why did it sell for so low? How do you know it sold low?
Because it made you $24,000 in a little over a year, and you sold it for only $2,000 when you paid for it.
We held it longer than a year. So the reason why we sold it at the rate we did was that was the multiple at the time that we could get. 6 months. It was not 6 months revenue. It was not 6.
Revenue, or is that net income?
This is net income. Sorry, I put revenue for me. So yeah, it's a mistake on it. It's net numbers. So here's another one, $3,400. This is a digital product. Revenue on that, or net, would be $7,500 on it. We sold it for $5,000. Again, we made $9,000, 270% return. So here's one that went south on us from a Google update. We bought it for $110. So I'm giving you the negative as well. So this is the negative one. We sold for bought it for $110. Our revenue, while we've held it, we've made $112 on it. So we've made our money back now. We have not sold this particular one yet. So So our total profit was 112. It was 102% return. Annualized, though, for the amount of time we've held it, it's about a 47% return on our money. So for us, that's still a pretty good return, because if I had taken my 100 grand and put it into something else in the stock market or whatever else, I would not have made 47% return on my money. So I'm going to take the question here in just a second. So for me, the number one rule for me is it's not the price, it's the what? Terms. So whenever we're looking to do deals, people were saying, well, for example, I sold a multi-million-dollar business back in 2008, and everybody wants to know, well, how much did you sell it for? I'm like, you don't want to know how much I sold it for. You want to know what the terms were, because that's exactly what it came down to. Is if I gave you the number that it was sold for versus what the terms were, they're two totally different things in your perspective or mindset. Because I could say, I'm going to buy your website for $10 million today. How many of you would do that deal? $10 million, you want to sell your site right now? Only 2 people would sell their site for $10 million. Boy, you guys are aggressive. So yes, the terms would be, something like, well, I'll pay you 1% of net revenue over the course of 10 years. And then after that, and you could do a whole bunch of different things in terms of the terms. So be careful on that. So what I'll do right now is I'll take questions, and do you want me to just kind of coordinate it and hand them off to you guys? So, you want to do the mic, and I'll repeat the question too, but go ahead.
Just going back to some of the examples you showed of some of the sales, you had sites that were selling for, let's say, 10 grand, and their annual net revenue was 25,000. Why would anyone sell their site for less than what their net profit is?
That wasn't for a year. That was not 12 months figures. Those were from the time we held the site. So I could have held that site for 3 years and made 25 grand on it or whatever. If I'd made 24 grand on it, it'd be 8 grand a year. We bought it for 10. That's about a 13-month multiple.
I understand.
That's where we were at.
I understand. Well,
But having said that, people do sell their sites for less than a year.
Yeah.
You buy them all the time, right?
Yeah, we buy them all the time. We've bought sites from people who the lowest is probably 3 months of net.
But, having said that, again, you have to think about what the time commitment is. Because if somebody's selling a site, like I said, that's making $3 grand a month, but it's 40 hours a week of work, you're buying yourself a really poorly paying job. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there. I mean, to give you an example, there's sites we've bought that there was zero revenue coming into it, but it had a great amount of traffic. Mm-hmm. So we bought it at the multiple of whatever, zero whatever, and immediately started putting ads and things onto that site to generate the revenue, and instant winner.
When someone looks to sell a site, and let's say the revenue numbers are substantially large, they're close to the $1 million range. When you put a valuation on that site, is it the net revenues, or do you take the gross net revenues? In other words, you have officer salaries in there and whatnot that wouldn't be part of.
He and I disagree on this.
Okay, so the
broker's going to be. Let me just preface by saying the broker will have a different viewpoint than the buyer or the seller. But anyway.
Okay, so the question was, when we look at a site, for instance, with $1 million in net income, what's counted in the net income? At our brokerage, and a lot of them, we look at something called seller's discretionary earnings. In that case, we're going to add back the manager's salary. So let's say, for instance, your site earns $1 million and you pay yourself $500,000 a year salary. We're going to add that back because that's a discretionary expense. You could just pay yourself $1 a year. So it makes no difference. What we're looking for is, what's the total net income before taxes that the next guy or woman is likely to get. Now, where the disagreement comes in is brokers will add back other things as well. If we're going to add back things that are one-time expenses. So maybe you paid a bunch of money for a Google, a site link audit or something like that, and it was a one-time expense. Or you may have some personal stuff mixed in. We're going to add that back to come up with the net income number. We're going to show our work so that buyers can debate us as much as they want. We're not going to hide anything, but the buyers are going to beat us up over it.
And I think he kind of said something more along the lines that I was thinking. It wasn't really what he normally says, I thought, but what is it going to cost me to hire somebody to operate this site, right? Because if the owner's operating it and he's just taking all the income as net, but he's not paying himself, or even if he is paying himself, typically I thought you guys removed that owner's salary.
We added back. So let's say that...
So maybe that's a little different than I thought you did in the past.
Yeah, so let's say the net income on your profit and loss statement shows $100,000, but you're paying yourself $30,000 a year. We're going to show $130,000 as your net income.
Okay, so it is.
A guy like Chuck is going to beat us up. A guy like Dave is going to beat us up. But most buyers are not Chuck and Dave. The multiples that we get are usually going to be higher than what these guys are going to be willing to pay, which is why we actually
we as buyers want to buy it for as low as possible.
Right, but
right?
I think
so. The sellers and the brokers want to sell it.
We want to sell it for as much as possible.
But I think as a buyer, the most important thing is figuring out what your time costs are going to be, and if it makes sense to you. Because if the site's making $50,000 a year and you have to put in 40 hours of work, it's not worth buying.
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
Hi. Very quick, 2 questions. First one is, sometimes some ad networks might pay out differently to different people. Is there a way to verify that, let's say, AdSense revenue that one owner is making is going to be replicated when I transfer the site to my account? Or is that kind of part of the risk I'm taking?
So it probably depends on the ad network. But if it was like AdSense, I mean, it's not
You
like...
can verify AdSense easy.
No, but what he's saying is that maybe it pays different. I don't know that AdSense does that, but he's saying...
That's a risk. The question is, if I'm basing a purchase decision on what the last person was making, how am I guaranteed that I'm going to get the same payouts? It is a risk. And to a degree, it's a little bit of buyer beware, and if you're buying a site, you need to do due diligence, and you need to plan for a range of contingencies. And, when you wonder, why is it possible to buy a site, in these guys' case, for 6 months of earnings up to a top of maybe 3 years of earnings, which is still good if it maintains. If you buy a site for $300,000 and it makes you $100 a year without working that hard, that's a really good rate of return. Why is it possible to do that? Because of the risks.
And to give you an example, I had a hosting website that I bought, and the guy had relationships with 3 different hosting companies that he was able to get a deal that I just couldn't get off the street. And so I told him, I want to not only, number 1, take over your account, okay, but number 2, that we have a conversation with that company that they know I'm taking over your account because you had the relationship. So we got on the phone with all 3, did the deal so that person knew, we signed deals with each one so they knew exactly what was going on. That's how we did it.
Some accounts are transferable, and when they are, you transfer them. Some accounts are not.
So, like, PayPal is technically not a transferable account. So if you're buying somebody who has a recurring revenue model, it's a risk because you need to take over their PayPal account. I mean, you have to, right? Because they've got built up recurring revenue, and it could go away.
All right. I also want to know if you have any tips for the initial contact when trying to buy a website, because obviously you don't want to come off as really desperate to buy it or really savvy. Do you guys have any tips or tricks for,
that's our $500 event. It's right next. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Well, I don't think either of these guys comes off as desperate or savvy. So
yeah.
So, and the question was, how do you cold call somebody to buy their website? And I looked at one recently where the lady had pretty much stopped blogging. She's like, oh, I don't have time for this anymore. I'm going to stop blogging. So I just approached it and said, hey, some of my writers love your blog, and they told me that you've closed it, and we wanted to find out if we could take it over and keep it alive. And then that was me asking if it's for sale without asking for if it's for sale, because maybe she would just give it to me for free, because that does happen. Somebody just wants to keep it alive. But then she's like, oh, are you interested in buying? So. Just being genuine about stuff and not lying, right? I didn't say, oh, I read your blog and I love it and this and that, because when it comes time to negotiate a deal, it's outside of my wheelhouse. Like, in the niche it was in, like, I don't know about it. So if she started asking me questions, I would be lost.
For us, we have somebody on staff that all they do all day long is send emails to the people of sites that we want to buy, and it's not like a mass spam email. They go to the website because we don't want to just buy any website. We have specific sites that we want to buy. So they have a very templated approach to it. And I can't remember the exact verbiage, but it's basically something to the effect of, we noticed your website in Google, found out that it fits really well with something we're doing, and we'd love to talk to you a little bit more about it. Not talk about buying, but more of a JV partnership type of approach. And when we do that, the person is much more willing to get onto the phone immediately with you. Whereas when you say, we're interested in buying, they immediately say, well, how much? Well, I won't know until I get some data. Well, but just tell me what's a range. And so you get into this whole debate back and forth of all that kinds of stuff.
Get them on the phone as quickly as you can.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to get on the phone, because it just adds such a layer of trust. Because a lot of people, they think you're like some spammer hacker that's just trying to scam them in some way.
Yeah.
So you can get them on the phone, show that you speak clearly and articulately. It's going to go a long way. I kind of had a problem where I was trying to negotiate with them. They're like, well, how much do you want to pay? And at that point, it's like, well, I need more information. But then people don't want to give you information. They want you to throw out a number. And I've done it where people contacted me. Hey, I want to buy your site. It's like, all right, how much do you want to pay? Well, I need you to give me this information. It's like, you contacted me. I didn't contact you. How much do you want to pay? And then it always falls apart. So,
how do you evaluate a site that has little revenue but a lot of traffic?
Okay, so how do you evaluate a site that has little revenue but lots of traffic? It's a tough one, because most buyers that we encounter do get hung up on the revenue, but then you've got the savvy guys who know how to turn traffic into revenue. It would be very case specific, I think. If someone contacted me and said, we've got 2 million uniques a month, but we really don't monetize it, but it's in this interesting niche, it would be case specific. I think I would try and figure out, okay, if I own the site, what would be easy ways to monetize it? What do we think it could earn? And then we'd probably apply a multiple to that. But realistically, I'd probably ask you as the seller, I'd say, here's a couple ideas to monetize. Can you put these on the site for 2 weeks just so we can find out if the idea holds water or not?
Because see, I would, sorry to interrupt you, but I would be careful to do that as the buyer, because then the seller would be like, oh, wow, I just now am able to generate this revenue, and they might want more money all of a sudden or something. So one of the things that I would say is I would ask that seller, why haven't you monetized yet? I mean, give me a reason why you haven't done it yet. If it's just that they just don't know how to monetize, that's one answer. But if it's, oh, we've tried all these other things before. But me as a buyer, there's two different types. One that knows that industry really well and knows how to monetize that industry. So if I've got another website over here that's very similar to that one, and I'm able to monetize this one, and the same kind of traffic is coming to this one, it isn't 100% by any means, but you have a pretty good idea that you could monetize this one for about the same amount of money. So if you're selling that site, you want to go to people that have similar sites and say, hey, would you have an interest in buying this one? Because you can monetize that one, so why don't you do it with this one? I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
And again, a lot of it just depends on, are you selling or are you buying? Because you're in two different camps. If you're selling, it's how do I maximize what I'm going to get?
Yeah.
If you're buying, how do I get it for less than what I think it's worth?
And I think that, as a buyer, that's what you look for, right? You look for sites where you look at it and you're like, how are they making that much money with that crappy site? Because then you say, okay, I can fix it up and really make some good money with it. So you're looking, as a buyer, you're looking for the potential, but you don't want to pay for the potential, right? You want to pay as little as you can based on the revenue, knowing that there's a lot of upside and potential.
Yeah.
I have two questions kind of related. How do you, would the length of the URL matter in placing a value on the website value? And the other thing is, how would you approach corporations on a website, not for affiliate marketers, but if you have short URLs that you're planning to target big corporations?
I got the first question.
Sorry, are you asking the value of the site on the first one? Yeah. How do you determine value?
Yeah, meaning if the length of the URL is shorter, would it be considered a lot more value?
Oh, if it's a shorter link, shorter URL name, is it more value? Like you're talking more on the domain side,
domain
right?
Name, yeah.
Yeah.
So the question was if the longer the domain, does it lessen the value or increase the value, right? I don't buy sites based on domains for the most part. I buy it based on revenue and potential. So I typically, if it's something like with a super spammy domain name, I probably would stay away and devalue it because of that. But if it's 12 characters versus 15, it's somewhat irrelevant to me as long as it's not, 12 hyphens and 38 characters long.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a 4-letter domain or something, you probably are looking, if that's a word, you're probably looking more towards a domainer, somebody who just buys and sells domains versus somebody who's
and I think that's a trap that a lot of sellers fall into because they try to value their company based on assets, meaning, oh, well, my domain's worth $500,000 and my this is worth this and this is worth that, but I'm only making 10 grand in revenue. Right? You can't say, well, you add that $500,000 for the value of the domain plus 10 grand revenue. You almost have to go like either way on one of those. You either sell it for the revenue or you sell it for the domain. You're going to be hard pressed to try to sell it for both.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Chuck on that last point. You can't just add up the value of everything and come up at something. Ultimately, the value of whatever you're selling is going to be, some discounted cash flow of what you expect to earn over the lifetime of the business. But I will make a quick point on domains. There's a completely separate market for domains from websites. There are some brokerages and some sell-it-yourself places that specialize in domains. I personally don't touch them anymore. My last experience was I had a guy that wanted $3.2 million for a premium domain. The highest offer I could get was 200 grand, and I said, this marketplace makes no sense to me, I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, when you sell domains.
C52.com is the one I always look at when I want to buy, SEDO.
CEDO, yeah.
CEDO, is that how you say it?
Yeah,
CEDO.
I always
call it CEDO.
Yeah, I don't know. What was your second question, sorry? We
answered it.
Basically, I did have few domains where big corporations approached me because of their product alignment with the name of the domain. And no revenues, just the URL, 6 letters, 4 letters. And
you mean, so you're saying if you have a good domain that a big corporation might want?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get into big corporations. So with that one I just mentioned, it was a premium domain. I was cold calling big companies to try to get in and see if they want to buy it. I had a hard time getting past the gatekeepers. I think your best strategy is, wait for the phone to ring. That's how you're going to maximize value because they'll eventually, if they want it, they'll find you, and you've got the power if they call you, I think.
Yeah, I would say the company I sold back in 2008 that acquired mine, they actually managed the portfolio of domains for like Microsoft and Coca-Cola and all the big names out there. And they talking to their people and I'm trying to get a little bit of feel for it. It's exactly what he said, which is if they have a domain they want, they'll go get it. They don't really have an interest in somebody coming to them. If somebody comes to them, they'll offer something so cheap that you're like, what? Why would I even do that? The other thing you got to watch for is if you think that a big company would want it, you got to be careful it doesn't have like their trade name in it or anything like that because now you're into
That's what I was going to say. When you're buying sites, that's one of the most important things. Make sure you're not buying iPadsDirect.com.
Yeah.
Like, you're just going to get crushed. And just because the other guy's been able to make a bunch of money doesn't mean Apple's not going to come banging on your door really quick. I had a friend who had a phone number, and he tried to sell it to a large company, and it was 1-800 their name, and it was a phone number, right? They sued him for trying to sell it to them. And it was like, it's not a domain name, it's numbers, right? It just happens to also spell their name.
Did they win?
And I don't know, I think it's still going on,
That's
but it's just
insane.
like, at that point, you're screwed. So be very careful with trademarks. And even like, it doesn't have to be an exact trademark. If it doesn't have to be iPad, it could be iThis.com.
Yeah, the company I was just referring to, that's what they do, the management, they actually go after that. But what they told me is what they go after is the negative, anything that's negative. So if it's, iPads suck, they go after that. All those kinds of things. But anyway.
But they go after the positive ones.
Well, I'm sure they will. Yeah, they'll go after positive too.
Don't spend a lot of money on a trademark.
I wouldn't spend much money on that either.
I just want to add to that. It's like $50,000 per instance, the penalty if you got slapped for a trademark violation.
If you get slapped for a trademark violation, it's 50 grand each. Yeah.
Basically, I owned a domain because of business planning I was doing, and some corporation approached me because they
Oh, see,
That's what
now
you
that's
want.
different. Yeah, that's exactly what you want, which is his point was they had a new product launch and you own the domain already.
Yeah,
Without knowing that, that's thumbs up for you.
Yeah, just tell them I'm a reasonable guy, make me an offer, and I'll give you an answer pretty quickly, and let them make the first move.
Yeah.
All right.
Other question?
I have a question for you. What do you do to protect yourself when a competitor comes knocking on your door and they want analytics, they want inside information? Of course, you're going to sign the non-disclosures and all that, but you're opening up your world of how you run your business, and now they know how much you're paying for this to market, which they are, and how you're marketing it. How do you protect yourself?
Yeah, research the seller, like I said, like figure out who they are and if they're already in the market or not. I don't really sell too much, so it's not my expertise.
We make buyers sign about a 5-page non-disclosure that really protects the rights of the seller and everyone else. But the other thing is, at least in our case, probably 75 to 80% of the sites that we list eventually sell. So it's kind of a numbers game. Most buyers aren't going to make you an offer unless they feel comfortable that you're willing to share some degree of stuff. But if you do, the odds of actually selling the site are pretty high. But it's a calculated thing. If you get a bad feeling about someone, zip your lips.
I can tell you that with our the one company I had, we had 2 stages. So the first stage of the process was make us an offer. We'll tell you all the basics of everything, and then based on the offer, you sign a letter of intent that you are willing to do it this if due diligence works out. Now you get into the okay, what are you getting for this? What do you get? But they've signed already a letter of intent that says I am willing to move forward at this price if these things are accurate.
And to add one more thing on it is that is a major concern when I'm buying companies. So if I go to Flippa, right, and it's like I saw once there was like howtobakeapotato.com and it was making like $2,000 a month. So like, okay, maybe we'll buy it. And it's like, you know what? It'll cost me $89 to produce the content and make a new one. So now I have a how to make sweet potato website or something. Like that's what's going to happen if it's publicly available knowledge and it's a niche that's easy to get into and they're making some easy money on it. So I think that probably happens with the brokerage stuff too.
Well, we don't disclose the domain or any information until you sign the 5-page NDA. So it's just bullet points that are so generic you'll never figure out the site.
But at the same time, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. So it's like it's just something you have to know. And that's I don't know if I talked about it. I was going to. I might have skipped over it. But that's one of the things you need to look at is the the difficulty of getting into a market, right? So what is the barrier to entry for the market? Do they have to spend $500 in capital to create the website and all the back ends and everything, or is it something they can produce with like $50 worth of writers?
And we have a spreadsheet that we do due diligence and valuation piece on, and that's one of our line items is what would it take to reverse engineer what this person did, and how much time and energy and money would it cost to do that, and that's part of the valuation we put on it.
Right, like if you look at markets and they're the only player in the market, there's one person, like is that good or bad? Because if they're the only person, you buy it, what happens when 3 other people come in? Does your revenue get cut to a third of what it was? So sometimes it's good to have competition.
Your other question?
Do we have time for one final question or not?
Yeah, anybody else? Question?
Is that it? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.